Hello and welcome back to Meet the Authors. I am Narissa Golden, the Festival Coordinator for the Aliogana Festival of the Word. Now, today we've got somebody back who's been with us before. In fact, she was one of the guests of our first virtual festival in 2020. Welcome, Christal Clashing.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for having me here.
It's good to have you back. Um, I just want to, just to tell you that I'm excited about this book. You shared it with me. You shared the short film, and we are going to show it during the festival. So be sure to check the schedule for when we are going to show it online. And if you come out to movie night, you may be seeing it as well. But Christal, how did this story come about?
So I like to think this is a combination of all of my water activities and experiences sort of expressing themselves at a moment of crisis or grappling with my future. I had signed up to a storytelling course called a transmedia storytelling course online. You know, this is during pandemic times and everything, lockdowns, and I just wanted to improve some of my skills as a storyteller. And so I found this, and I realized I was talking about Anansi stories. And then a few months later, I had kind of just crafting an Anansi story that was a little bit alternative to Anansi stories that we already knew. And when I came across a friend who mentioned if I had heard of Yemoja as a water goddess, from some African traditions, I said no, and he told me about it, and I was just blown away. And I was like, oh my goodness, this sounds amazing. And somehow they combined together, and this story, Yemoja Nancy, came into being. And it came into being over, I think, a period of 3 months when we were shooting the photos to go along with the story as I was writing the story. And so it was just a very great collaborative experience between my team, which is a 3-person team, a photographer, a makeup artist who also acted as the art director, and then myself as author and model for the book.
Okay, so this is interesting. So what came first, the story, the short film? You said it came together. So which parts of it did you have first?
I had the outline of a story to start with, sort of. I remember looking into my wardrobe. I had the story idea. Then I remember looking into my wardrobe and I was like, oh, you know what? I'd love to shoot some of this story like illustrated on the water. And because we hadn't gone anywhere because of the pandemic, I had a bunch of dresses I haven't worn for almost 2 years. And I said, you know what? Let's put this onto the water. And so when I thought of that, I was like, well, it'd be nice to have some makeup with it too. So, and I had just worked on a shoot with one of my friends. And she had a makeup designer who I knew was familiar with and a new photographer. And we got along really well. So I called them up and I said, let's try this wacky idea and try to shoot some underwater photos with some of my dresses that kind of help illustrate the story that I'm writing. So that happened between October and I would say early January. So October 2021 into early January 2022. I was able to publish the book as an ebook on my website. And then the film came a little bit later because I had always envisioned it as a multimedia, a story that could cut across different media formats. And one of my aunts was like, oh, you know who'd be perfect to do this? My cousin, Abby McCoy. And I was just like, oh, that's she's a choreographer, she's an actress, she's a dancer. And so when I got an opportunity to pull together something for showing in Canada. And so over the months of, I would say, August into September this year, 2022, we were able to pull together the film, which was a time pressured affair. What we managed to put together. So we have as the dancer and choreographer Abby McCoy, and then I had another cousin, DJ Rhythm Master, is also Darren Byron, who did the music along with one of his friends, Jamal Elise. And we had the videographer, Zia Wiltshire, who had worked with my cousin Abby on several projects before.
Okay.
So
Well,
um,
it's beautifully done, and I'm gonna try to insert a piece of this into the interview so people can see it. But tell me about the Anansi aspect of it. Again, you said you thought this would be a good way to tell a different version of Anansi. Usually, with seeing Anansi the stricter, the trickster, but this time, Anansi is in a bit of a trouble. Tell us how you managed to blend the story of this water goddess with Anansi.
yeah, so I immediately knew that Anansi was going to be a woman. Um,
Hmm.
and that was the first change.
Yeah.
And because and I know most times Anansi is a male character, but when you look into the history of Anansi, Anansi is really a shapeshifter.
Hmm.
And so I found that was interesting. So I felt comfortable making Anansi a woman. And also because in this story, Anansi does get shape shifting powers into a spider, someone had to give her those powers. And so for me, this was sort of like this origin story of the female version of Anansi. And this isn't to say that Anansi, over exploration of this world in future stories, that she won't turn into a trickster, but this is the beginning of her story, the way that I see it. And so for me, with Yemoja, I wanted to have a story about someone who's very comfortable in the water, who has comes from our African heritage. And that's who Yemoja represented. But I also know we have a lot of resistance in our community around being in the water. There's a lot of fear, and Nancy represented that kind of fear of the
Yeah,
water.
that's actually quite powerful because I was fascinated by the fact that the story begins in Africa. And again, you're retelling a familiar story in a new way, putting Anansi on this boat that's bringing our people from Africa to the New World. How did you go about placing a position in Anansi in that way? Why did you think it was important to create these sorts of visuals?
Yeah, so I think a large part of it actually came from my own crossing between just off the coast of Africa into the Caribbean with my rowing team, Team Antigua Island Girls. We did that in 2018 into 2019, and that was a very it was a very spiritual experience, I would say, for all of us, and it kept with me. And I think it was able to bubble itself to the surface in this way, that it was important for me to create that link between Africa and the Caribbean. And I do feel that we've lost some of our, we've definitely lost history, we've lost stories, we've lost stories that were pre-colonial, and I felt like this was a way to kind of sort of tie those stories together, the ones we have in the Caribbean about Anansi, which do come from Africa, but have something a little bit stronger through Yemoja as an African water goddess or water deity, to tie those two folklore or the two beings together a little bit tighter. I wanted us to get a little bit closer to our own African history.
That's actually quite fascinating. We did not talk about the fact that you are part of the original team, Island Girls, that did that amazing trip across the Talisker Challenge that you all did 2018. It was so phenomenal to watch. So tell me about what that felt like making that crossing, knowing that you were possibly taking the same route that many of these boats took to bring our people to the Caribbean. What Tell me about that, the feeling there.
Yeah, there were two things, well, maybe even three things in particular. One, every day we never forgot to honor or to remember the fact that we were on a pathway that our ancestors had crossed prior. We never forgot that. I remember even my whole lead up to that role was crossing a lot of personal challenge, and I remember being on the road maybe 2 weeks in at nighttime. I remember looking up at the stars, and I remember thinking that's the exact place I needed to be, nowhere else in the world, just out in the middle of the ocean somewhere. I felt very assured that that was the place I needed to be at. And even we were able to get butterflies coming in the middle of the Atlantic, and we never expected that. And
Oh,
yeah, and a few of us had persons who had passed away pretty recently, and it was almost like a sign to see that they were with us, and it was just as if we just felt we just felt like as if we were doing something that would honor our ancestors, and we never ever forgot it at all. Every day we remarked upon it as a group.
that's quite powerful. You also mentioned the idea of this loss of finding a way to bring back these stories, and which I think is what people are going to get when they do read Yemoja's Anansi, is this sense of connection that you do so beautifully, both in the written word and also in the visual, the film as well. So I commend you and your team for that. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I'm glad that you are sharing with us, and that we'll be able to show it at the Elegana Festival of the Word this year. Tell us about what's next for you with this project, and how can we connect with you?
Yes. So I'm right now looking to see how I want to take this product into different mediums. I'm currently experimenting with some interactive fiction, so something around the lines of like not a video game, but just more like a interactive piece. You can have different misadventures, go through different misadventures of Emotions and Anansi. Um, and I just want to play around with different media and see different ways to tell this story. So that's where I'd like to go with this. Um,
So do you see a series then, in terms of after you've done the game? Do you think you will see Umoja's version of Anansi come back with other mischief later on?
Definitely.
Okay.
I have a outline of books I would like to, or stories I would like to explore a bit more. And even when I was doing the medium also shapes what stories I tell. And so
Mhm.
as I was going through the interactive fiction sort of medium, it turned out to be the misadventures of Emojis and Nancy. Didn't expect it to be, but it started to turn into that. And whereas I had another plan for something else, and so the medium also shapes the story as well. But definitely, there's more to be explored with our Caribbean folklore. Definitely.
That's wonderful. And that's why this is called a Festival of the Word, because it's not just about the written word, it can also be the visual word, the musical word. And we love how you're bringing all of these elements together. Thank you so much, Crystal Clashing, for being with us in the Meet the Author series. And we look forward to reading more stories from you. And we definitely say congratulations on Umoja's Anansi. Everybody go to crystalclashing.com to order your copy. Take care.
Thank you.